I've never gotten around to playing any of the Settlers titles for whatever reasons, and whilst doing some research into which title to get as my first venture into this franchise, it was suggested that Settlers 2 has the most city builder type of experience of them all. And since that's what interests me most when it comes to these titles, I got the 10th anniversary edition. The game starts with a very nicely narrated run-through of the story background, making use of some pretty well illustrated images which I think reflect the not quite realistic proportions of the Settlers, their dwarfish cartoon characters. But something stuck out to me as being a bit odd. The images of the female Romans, because apparently the Settlers are Romans, they're a bit, well, let's just say they're a bit more sexualized than I would have thought would work with the overall design and proportions of the Settlers. I mean, whatever dwarf fetish floats your boat, person who illustrated, it's just something that stuck out to me. But that very minor and personal piece of what the fuck aside, that same great voice narrates and explains the tutorials as well, which are quite quick and not very painful to go through, after which you can either start playing through the campaign or go for some free play. This being my first time in the game, I started playing through the campaign. The missions are nothing special, pretty simple expand till you reach a certain point on the map type goals. But things get more complicated once enemy settlers appear. It's kinda difficult to get through later campaign missions without a couple of map restarts, since once you'll know where to find the various resources that are crucial, coal, iron and gold when it comes to the maps with enemies, you'll restart the map so you can quickly expand into that direction and then can see to your steady domination and conquering of the map. In terms of building options and types, Settlers 2 offers quite a wide array of different buildings and most of them are part of a much larger production chain, so you'll need to build several different buildings in order to get end-use product. This is quite reasonable, however, the skill lies in how and where you place these buildings so that you can optimize the speed with which raw materials get transported from one link in the chain to the other. This is where setting flags, arranging and rearranging roads come into play. Whenever you'll set a flag onto an already existing road, you'll basically be creating a way station for your carrier settlers. The more segmented a particular road is, the more materials can be transported by the carriers in something of a relay race methodology. Also, there's an unlimited number of settlers your headquarters can produce, these being all males. I still don't understand how that particular piece of cloning works with ancient Roman technology, but if I'm gonna be okay with the dwarf fetish, I'll let the Roman cloning pass. This is hardly a realistic game to begin with. Anyway, the idea being, you don't have to pick and choose which roads get more carriers, which, now that I say it out loud, kinda would have been a great piece of gameplay mechanic to add in. But now onto the roads. Not only because this is an important gameplay aspect of city builders, but also because they tend to get the least amount of attention in terms of what people talk about when relating things about city building games. The great thing about Settlers 2 is that you can always destroy and rebuild roads. Sometimes this becomes necessary because of slow movement of goods. Some others you'll have to do it because you've destroyed a particular building and all of the roads that went around it can now go straight through where the building used to be. This is something that tends to happen a lot to woodcutter buildings, since you need them in order to clear space for other constructions. Once the particular patch of forest is cleared, the woodcutter building has no more reason to exist, so down it goes and roads have to be rebuilt. This constant cycle of building a settlement and destroying different parts of it as they become obsolete, and then building different things, as well as restructuring roads to optimize the flow of goods, is where the major crux of the game exists. The smoother you can make your raw materials go from the building that produces them to the ones that need them to the units that require the finished product, the faster you'll develop your settlement. One thing that you can do in the game to improve your transportation speeds is to build yourself a donkey farm. They even move like tiny motorbikes when they're in their stables, so you know they're fast. But actual city building aside, the game does also come with a combat component, and whoo boy, it's the most awkwardly implemented mechanic in the game, since it wasn't really built with combat in mind, at least I hope it wasn't. You have no direct control over what your soldiers do, everything is automated, and the only things that you can do is play around with some features to make sure you always have soldiers ready for the front lines. There's no real strategy to speak of when it comes to combat here. Also, once the first skirmishes start, you're pretty much locked into fighting until one of you loses. And if you hadn't had time to secure sources of coal, iron and gold by this time, you'll undoubtedly lose, because you can't have soldiers without weapons, which require iron ore and coal, and you can't upgrade your soldiers without gold coins, which require coal and gold ore. So this leads to several games having to be restarted simply because you expanded into the wrong part of the map, because there is no means of trading for resources you're lacking. It's just not great game design, nor level design for that matter. Remember when in my Banish review I said that what kept that game from being even better was the lack of an actual theme and more links in the production chain? Well, even though Settlers does have a theme and more links in the production chain, the theme part isn't that engrossing, and due to the really poorly executed combat component, it pretty much brings the entire experience down quite a few notches. Also, the needs of the settlers are almost never really important, only miners and soldiers consume food and beer, so there's very little to manage in terms of food, morale, or natural disasters and such. So while I did enjoy playing Settlers 2 10th Anniversary Edition, I feel the need for something even more thematic. I feel the need to rule and manage something more grandiose, something like maybe an empire.